The horn sounded across the fjord, their haunting call signaling the return of the longships. Mist clung to the surface of the dark waters as the curved prows of 3 dragon-headed vessels broke through the morning fog, oars moving in perfect rhythm. From the highest point of the settlement, Magnhild Haraldsdottir watched, her knuckles white as she gripped her father's sword. 10 winters had passed since she'd seen these shores. 10 winters since the night of blood and betrayal when her uncle Gunnar had slain her father, King Harald, and claimed his throne. 10 winters since she had fled into the night, a child of 12 summers, spirited away by loyal servants while her mother's screams still echoed through the great hall. Now she had returned to claim what was hers by blood and birthright. "The gods have smiled upon our journey," said Kara, her shield maiden and most trusted friend. "Not a single storm to slow our path." "The gods know justice has been too long delayed," Magnhild replied, her breath visible in the cold air. "My uncle sits in my father's high seat, drinks from my father's horn, and rules my father's people. This cannot stand." She turned from the view, her cloak of wolf fur swinging around her shoulders. The weight of her father's sword, Drengskappa, honor, hung at her side, a constant reminder of her purpose. She had carried it across the seas, through foreign lands, through battle and bloodshed, keeping it close even when she had nothing else. Magnhild had spent these years in exile among the Danes, fostered by a jarl who had been her father's friend. There she had learned the ways of war and statecraft, biding her time, gathering loyal warriors, and waiting for the moment when the Norns would weave her return into the tapestry of fate. That moment had come when word reached her that her uncle had grown weak, his rule unpopular, his warriors discontented. The settlement of Ravnholm, Raven's Isle, awaited its true ruler. What Magnhild didn't expect was to find Paul Drengerson waiting at the shore. The war band disembarked as the mist lifted, revealing the familiar shoreline of Ravnholm. Magnhild stepped onto the wet sand, her boots sinking slightly. The weight of her mail shirt felt reassuring beneath her tunic, the sword at her hip a promise. A group of warriors stood waiting, and at their center, a man whose height and breadth made him unmistakable even at a distance. Paul Drengerson, son of her father's most loyal housecarl, the boy who had once shared her childhood games. Now he stood as a man grown, his red-gold beard framing a face hardened by years of battle, his blue eyes watching her approach with an unreadable expression. "Magnhild Haraldsdottir," he called out, not bowing. "You returned to Ravnholm when most believed you dwelled in Helheim." "I am harder to kill than most," she answered, stepping forward to stand before him. "Though not for lack of trying on my uncle's part." A smile flickered at the corner of Paul's mouth, then vanished. "Your uncle rules here now. He will not surrender the high seat willingly." "I did not come to ask," Magnhild said, her hand resting on her sword hilt. "I came to take what is mine by right of blood." Paul studied her face, searching for something. Then he nodded once. "My father died defending yours. I swore to follow his path of honor." "And where does that path lead you now, Paul Drengerson?" Magnhild asked, aware of the warriors watching this exchange, aware that this moment would determine whether she gained allies or made new enemies. "To the only true heir of Ravnholm," he said, and went down on one knee before her, drawing his sword and laying it at her feet. "My sword is yours, princess. As is my life." A murmur ran through the gathered warriors, both those who had come with her and those who had accompanied Paul. Magnhild felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She would not have to fight for every inch of ground in her homeland. "Rise," she commanded, and when he stood, she saw in his eyes something that made her heart quicken despite herself. "We have much to discuss." As they walked up the path toward the settlement, Magnhild felt the eyes of the people upon her. Some stared in disbelief, others in hope. Children pointed and whispered. She had been gone so long that few recognized her, but the word spread quickly. The the lost princess had returned. "Your uncle holds his Yule feast tonight," Paul said quietly as they walked. "All the important men of Ravnholm will be gathered in the hall." "Then we shall join them," Magnhild said, her mind already forming the shape of her challenge. "It has been too long since I've enjoyed my father's hospitality." The old beliefs ran strong in Magnhild's blood. She knew that vengeance was not merely her right but her duty. The spirits of her slain parents cried out for blood, and until she answered that call, they could find no peace in the afterlife. A blood feud, once begun, must be carried through to its conclusion. This was the way of her people, the way of honor. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, "Remember, little raven, a ruler must be ruthless with enemies. Mercy to those who would harm your kin is no virtue, it is weakness that endangers all who depend upon you." This belief had sustained her through the long years of exile. It had driven her when all else failed. It had given her purpose when despair threatened to consume her. And yet, as she walked beside Paul, listening to him speak of what had befallen Ravnholm in her absence, doubt crept into her heart for the first time. Was endless bloodshed truly the only path? Would vengeance bring her the peace she sought? She pushed these thoughts aside. Such questioning was dangerous. Her course was set. "Your uncle rules through fear, not respect," Paul explained as they approached his homestead, where she would rest before the confrontation. "The harvests have been poor these past 3 years, and he takes more than his share, claiming it as tribute. Many whisper that the gods have turned their faces from Ravnholm because a usurper sits in the high seat." "And what do you believe?" Magnhild asked. Paul met her gaze directly. "I believe that Ravnholm has bled enough. Your father was a good king, but the manner of his death has cast a shadow over this land. The old blood feuds your father worked to end have reignited under Gunnar's rule. We need healing, not more bloodshed." Magnhild stiffened. "My uncle murdered my father and mother in their own hall. Would you have me forgive this?" "I would have you rule wisely," Paul answered. "Revenge is a sword with no hilt, it cuts the hand that wields it as surely as it cuts its target." "You speak strangely for a warrior," Magnhild said. "I have seen enough death to know its cost," he replied. "I fought in the Western lands, raided the monasteries of Ireland, battled the Saxons in England. I have taken lives and watched friends fall. Glory in battle is a school's tale, the reality is blood and pain and grieving mothers." His words unsettled her more than she cared to admit. This was not the eager boy she remembered, who had swung wooden swords with her in the yard and sworn to be the greatest warrior Ravnholm had ever known. "You've changed," she said. "As have you," he replied. "The Magnhild I knew laughed more easily." "That Magnhild died the night her parents were slain," she said coldly. Paul nodded slowly. "Then perhaps tonight she can be avenged, and a new Magnhild can arise to lead her people." The great hall of Ravnholm stood atop the highest point of the settlement, its timber walls weathered by years of salt wind and rain. Torches blazed at the entrance, and the sounds of revelry spilled out into the winter night, laughter, shouting, the clatter of drinking horns against tables. Magnhild stood in the shadows, dressed now in a fine blue gown with her mother's silver brooches fastening her cloak, her father's sword concealed beneath the folds of fabric. Her golden hair had been braided elaborately by Kara, befitting her status as rightful ruler. Around her neck hung Thor's hammer, carved from whalebone, a token of strength and protection. Paul waited beside her, armed and ready. He had gathered 30 loyal warriors, men and women who remembered Harald's rule with fondness and who had suffered under Gunnar's harsh hand. "Are you certain of this path?" Paul asked quietly. Magnhild watched the hall, remembering the last time she had seen it, aflame, splattered with her parents' blood. "There is no other path. Blood calls for blood." Then let us answer that call, Paul said, though she thought she detected reluctance in his voice. They approached the hall openly, Magnhild at the forefront, her warriors falling in behind her. The guards at the door stared in confusion, not recognizing the woman who approached so boldly. "Who comes to the king's hall?" one demanded. "The king's rightful heir," Magnhild replied, throwing back her cloak to reveal the distinctive golden brooches of the royal line. The guards exchanged glances, uncertain. Taking advantage of their hesitation, Paul stepped forward. "Would you deny entry to the daughter of Harald, returned from exile?" he demanded. "Think carefully. Your choice tonight will be remembered." The older of the two guards peered at Magnhild's face, then his eyes widened in recognition. "By the gods, it is Harald's daughter." He stepped aside. "Enter, princess. But know that King Gunnar sits in the high seat now." "Not for long," Magnhild replied and strode past him into the hall of her childhood. The feast was in full progress, the air thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled mead, and wood smoke. Gunnar sat in the high seat at the far end, a corpulent man with a greying beard, his fingers adorned with gold rings. Beside him sat a pale young woman who must be his queen, looking unhappy and afraid. Magnhild walked down the central aisle between the long tables, her stride purposeful, her gaze fixed on her uncle. Conversations died as she passed, the hall gradually falling silent as heads turned to watch the unexpected visitor. Gunnar noticed the change in the atmosphere, his gaze lifting to see what had caused the disruption. His face, flushed with drink, suddenly paled. "Who dares interrupt the king's feast?" he demanded, though his voice wavered. Magnhild stopped before the high table, Paul and her warriors fanning out behind her. She drew her father's sword, the distinctive pattern-welded blade instantly recognizable to all who had seen it in Harald's hand. "I am Magnhild Haraldsdottir, rightful ruler of Ravnholm, daughter of the king you murdered," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent hall. "I have come to reclaim what is mine and to exact justice for my father's blood." Gunnar rose unsteadily to his feet. "You were declared dead years ago, your body lost at sea. This is some trick, some impostor sent to destabilize my rule." "No trick, uncle," Magnhild said coldly. "Look upon my face. Do you not see my father's eyes looking back at you? The eyes you thought closed forever when you ordered my ship burned at sea." Murmurs spread through the hall as people craned their necks to see better, to confirm for themselves if this woman truly was the lost princess. "It is her," an old woman's voice called out. "I was her nurse, I would know Harald's daughter anywhere." "The princess lives," another voice shouted, and soon others took up the cry. Gunnar's face twisted with rage and fear. "Guards! Seize this woman and her followers. They plot treason against your king." But the guards hesitated, looking from Gunnar to Magnhild and back again, uncertain whose orders to follow. Paul stepped forward. "Gunnar Grimson, you sit in a stolen seat. Your rule has brought nothing but hardship to Ravnholm. Step down and face justice for your crimes, or face my sword in combat." "I do not recognize your right to challenge me," Gunnar spat. "You are nothing, son of a dead housecarl." "Then recognize mine," Magnhild said, raising her sword. "I challenge you to homegang, uncle. Let the gods decide who should rule Ravnholm." A hush fell over the hall. The homegang, the formal duel, was sacred, governed by ancient laws that even a king could not ignore. To refuse such a challenge would bring shame and prove cowardice before all the assembled witnesses. Gunnar looked around the hall, seeing the expressions on his people's faces, reading the shift in loyalty. He had no choice. "I accept your challenge," he said finally, his voice thick with hatred. "Tomorrow at midday, on the dueling ground. But know this, niece, I sent you to your death once before. This time, I will make certain of it myself." Magnhild smiled coldly. "I look forward to it, uncle. Until then, I suggest you make peace with your gods. You will be seeing them soon." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the sky a pale blue overhead. The entire settlement gathered at the dueling ground, a flat space marked out with stones at the edge of the settlement. Here, for generations, disputes had been settled through combat under the watchful eyes of the gods. Magnhild stood ready, dressed in light armor, her father's sword in hand. She had spent the night in prayer to her ancestors, asking for their strength. Now, as she waited for her uncle to appear, she felt a strange calm settle over her. Paul approached, his expression troubled. "It is not too late to find another way," he said quietly. "Challenge his rule at the thing. Let the jarls and freemen decide." "This is the way it must be," Magnhild replied. "Blood for blood. And if more blood is spilled? If this begins another cycle of revenge?" "My uncle murdered my parents in cold blood," Magnhild said, anger flaring. "He tried to have me killed. Would you have me forgive this?" "I would have you break the cycle," Paul said. "Your father worked for years to end the blood feuds that weakened Ravnholm. He believed in justice, yes, but also in mercy when it served the greater good." Magnhild shook her head. "You don't understand. This is not just about vengeance, it is about justice. It is about honor. My parents' spirits cannot rest until their murderer has paid the price." "And what of your spirit?" Paul asked softly. "Will it find peace in bloodshed?" Before she could answer, a commotion at the edge of the gathering announced Gunnar's arrival. He came heavily armed, wearing full mail and a steel helm, surrounded by his personal guard. The old law speaker stepped forward to recite the ancient rules of the home gang. The combatants would fight within the marked boundaries. If either stepped outside the boundary, they would forfeit. The duel would continue until one yielded or died. "Do both combatants agree to abide by these terms?" the law speaker asked. "I do," Magnhild said clearly. Gunnar nodded grimly. "I do." "Then let the home gang begin. May the gods favor the righteous." Magnhild and Gunnar took their positions within the stone markers. She saw how her uncle moved, heavily, favoring his right leg slightly. Years of excess had not been kind to him. He struck first, a powerful overhead blow that she sidestepped easily. His sword bit into the frozen ground, and he grunted as he pulled it free. Magnhild circled, waiting, watching. "You fight like your father," Gunnar sneered. "Cautious. Weak. That's why he was so easy to kill. He never expected betrayal from his own brother." Magnhild felt rage surge through her, but controlled it, channeling it into focus rather than blind fury. "Tell me, uncle, did he look surprised when you stabbed him in the back? Did he have time to realize what a coward you truly are?" Gunnar roared and charged, swinging wildly. Magnhild deflected his blade and countered with a quick strike that drew first blood, slicing across his forearm. The crowd gasped. First blood had been drawn. Gunnar's attacks grew more desperate as they exchanged blows. Though older and slower, he was still strong, and his reach was longer. A lucky strike caught Magnhild's shoulder, the blade slicing through her padded tunic to the flesh beneath. She felt the sting of it, then the warm wetness of blood. "Your mother begged for her life," Gunnar taunted. "Offered herself to me if I would spare her. Perhaps I should have accepted before I cut her throat." White-hot rage exploded behind Magnhild's eyes. With a cry that seemed torn from the depths of her soul, she launched herself at Gunnar, her sword moving in a flurry of strikes that drove him backward, unable to counter. Her blade found openings in his defense, drawing blood from his thigh, his arm, his cheek. Driven back to the edge of the dueling ground, Gunnar stumbled, one foot slipping outside the stone boundary. He caught himself, but in that moment of imbalance, Magnhild's sword found its mark, plunging into his unprotected side. Gunnar dropped to his knees, blood flowing freely from the wound. He looked up at Magnhild, hatred burning in his eyes. "Finish it," he growled. Magnhild stood over him, her sword raised for the killing blow. This was the moment she had dreamed of for 10 years, her uncle at her mercy, his life in her hands, her parents' spirits crying out for vengeance. Yet something stayed her hand. She looked around at the gathered people of Ravnholm, of her people now. She saw fear in their eyes, but also hope. Hope for an end to the bloodshed, for a return to the peace they had known under her father's rule. Her gaze found Paul, standing at the edge of the crowd. He said nothing, but in his eye she read a question: "What kind of ruler will you be?" In that moment, Magnhild understood what her father had tried to teach her all those years ago. True strength lay not in vengeance, but in knowing when to break the cycle of bloodshed. "I will not kill you," she said, lowering her sword. "Your life is forfeit, but I will not have your blood on my hands. Instead, you will be sent into exile, never to return to these shores on pain of death." A murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. Gunnar stared at her in disbelief. "You are weak, just like your father." "No," Magnhild said. "I am strong enough to choose a different path. My father worked to end blood feuds, not perpetuate them. I dishonor his memory if I rule as you did, through fear and violence." She turned to address the assembled people. "People of Ravnholm, the gods have judged this combat and found in favor of the rightful ruler. I, Magnhild Haraldsdottir, claim my father's high seat. I swear to rule as he did, with justice tempered by mercy, with strength guided by wisdom." A cheer erupted from the crowd, growing in volume until it echoed across the fjord. Paul stepped forward, taking Gunnar into custody. The usurper's face was a mask of hatred, but he said nothing more as he was led away. As the crowd dispersed, Magnhild felt a curious lightness. The burden of hatred she had carried for so long seemed suddenly less heavy. Paul approached, a smile breaking across his face. "You surprised me," he said. "I surprised myself," Magnhild admitted. "All these years, I believed vengeance would bring me peace. Now I wonder if peace might come from something else entirely." "Such as?" Paul asked, his eyes holding hers. "Rebuilding what was broken," she said. "Healing old wounds. Finding a new way forward." "A wise queen indeed," Paul said softly. The days that followed were filled with activity as Magnhild reclaimed her rightful place. Her uncle was placed on a ship with provisions and sent into exile, his supporters given the choice to follow him or swear loyalty to the new queen. Most chose to stay. The winter deepened, but life in Ravnholm flourished under Magnhild's rule. She reopened trading routes her uncle had abandoned, distributed stored grain to those in need, and began preparations for spring planting. At her side through it all was Paul, offering counsel, support, and increasingly, something more. On the night of the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, a great feast was held in the hall to honor the returning light. Magnhild sat in the high seat that had once been her father's, watching as her people celebrated. The hall was warm with firelight and filled with laughter, something that had been rare during Gunnar's reign. Paul approached the high table, dressed in his finest tunic, his red-gold hair and beard gleaming in the firelight. He knelt before her, offering up a small wooden box. "My queen," he said formally, though his eyes held a warmth that was anything but formal. "I offer you this gift to mark the solstice and your return to your rightful place." Magnhild accepted the box, opening it to find a delicate silver arm ring, twisted in the pattern of two ravens in flight, their wings intertwined. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, the ravens of Odin. "It's beautiful," she said, genuinely moved. "My father began crafting it for your coming-of-age ceremony," Pul explained. "After he died, I finished it and kept it safe, believing that one day you would return." "You had faith when others did not," Magnhild said. "I knew your spirit," Pul replied. "Even as children, you never surrendered, never gave up what you believed was right." Magnhild studied his face, seeing in it the boy she had known and the man he had become. "You challenged my beliefs when I returned," she said. "You made me question the path of vengeance." "I feared for you," Pul admitted. "I have seen what happens when blood feuds consume a person's heart. I didn't want that for you." "Why?" she asked softly. Pul met her gaze steadily. "Because even when we were children, I knew my fate was tied to yours. Because I watched my father die defending yours, and I swore not just to honor his sacrifice but to protect what he valued most, your family's legacy of peace." He hesitated, then continued. "And because I have loved you since we were children, stealing honey cakes from the kitchen and hiding from your father's house girls." A hush fell over the nearby tables as people realized what was happening. Magnhild felt her heart quicken, aware of the public nature of this moment, aware too that her response would shape the future of Ravnholm. "Pul Drengerson," she said, her voice clear enough for all to hear, "you have proven your loyalty, your wisdom, and your courage. What would you ask of your queen?" "I would ask to stand beside you," Pul said. "Not just as your advisor or your warrior, but as your husband, if you would have me." The hall grew completely silent, all eyes on Magnhild. In that moment, she thought of her parents, of the love they had shared, of her father's wisdom in choosing a partner who complemented his strengths and challenged his weaknesses. "I would have you," Magnhild said, and the hall erupted in cheers. "Not because tradition demands a queen take a husband, but because I choose you, Pul Drengerson, to walk this path with me." She extended her hand, and Pul rose to his feet, taking it in his own. His smile was brighter than any fire in the hall. "A wedding at spring's first thaw," Magnhild announced to her people. "Let it mark not just our union, but the beginning of a new era for Ravnholm, an era of peace, of prosperity, of healing old wounds." As the celebration continued around them, Pul leaned close. "You have broken the cycle," he said quietly. "Your father would be proud." "I still miss them," Magnhild admitted. "I still wish for justice." "Justice was done," Pul reminded her. "But you chose mercy alongside it. That is the mark of a true ruler, knowing when to be firm and when to be gentle." Magnhild looked out over her hall, her people, her home reclaimed. For the first time in 10 years, she felt something like peace settle in her heart. The path ahead would not be easy, ruling never was, but she would not walk it alone. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her drinking horn. Pul touched his horn to hers. "To finding home again," he replied, and in his eyes, Magnhild saw her future unfold, bright with possibility, strong with shared purpose, and rich with a love that had survived separation, war, and the weight of duty. Outside, the winter stars wheeled overhead, the longest night giving way to the promise of returning light. Within the hall, the lost princess, now a queen, had found not just her throne, but her heart's true home.